comprehensive law on WPS. Of course, none of this would have been possible without the leadership of Senator Shaheen, who we are honored to have with us here today. Senator, I know that we'll be hearing from you soon. I'd also like to congratulate Irene and her team on the release of the new policy. I can tell you these undertakings are no small task, and I'm sure all of you will agree with me that integrating WPS across NATO's 3 core tasks of collective defense, crisis management, and cooperative security is essential for achieving lasting peace and stability. So with all of that in mind, I would now like to begin our first round of remarks from our distinguished guests. And with that, I'd like to welcome the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Belgium, Minister Labib. I would like to invite you to share your perspective on the critical role NATO allies and partners share in addressing the challenges and opportunities presented by technological advancements for women in the defense sector.
Thank you very much, Special Representative Irene Fellin, and thank you, Ambassador Gupta, for hosting this very, very important event. I cannot imagine, indeed, a NATO summit without a good conversation on women, peace and security. And I also started as a Minister of Foreign Affairs in 2022, so I'm used to now. And who better than you can lead us through this process. And I thank also all the participants for their insightful remarks. My country has always been a staunch advocate of the 1325 agenda and is now already implementing its 4th national action plan on the question of women, peace and security. And this plan has guided our action both nationally and internationally. It follows a very fundamental principle that women play an important role in de-escalating conflict and peace building. They should have their, seat always at the negotiating table. If we want to build sustainable peace, women's meaningful participation should be taken into account in all aspects related to peace. This has been, by the way, demonstrated many times in history. And one of the most famous examples happened in 2011 in the Philippines, when Muslim women helped and trained by UN women conducted negotiations with the Moro Islamic Liberation Front. A year later, they managed to put an end to one of the longest conflicts in the world, nearly 40 years. And more recently, a grandmother negotiator halts violence and frees hostages in Ituri, DRC, one of Africa's most war-torn regions. Her name is Petronil Vaweka. She won last year the Women Building Peace Awards. Allow me, if I may, to share with you a few words about her methods. She said she always has the same method. She said she looked the belligerents calmly in the eyes. She speaks respectfully but firmly to the parts of their psyche that remember traditional values and the voices of their mothers. Do they want always to live in war? How do they expect to build futures for themselves, peace for their own children, with violence that only isolates them further? So she said, I began by seeing these men not as enemies, but as human beings. They want to show everyone their strength, but many have become violent out of despair or fears. And so I listened to their stories, and at the end, these men understand that I have taken risks to come speak to them, and they respect me. So Petronil has recently worked as a trainer in conflict management for the effort by the DRC and the United Nations to stabilize this very troubled zone still now in Ituri. So coming back to the NATO agenda on WPS, I'm very pleased that NATO's new Women, Peace and Security policy, which will be adopted later on during this summit, is an ambitious and actionable document. We want to stress the importance of a full, equal, and meaningful participation of women, of gender-responsive leadership, and of horizontal ownership of this agenda across the entire organization. The main goal now must be to fully integrate this WPS policy across NATO's 3 core tasks. And we certainly need also to intensify our outreach towards our partners to make sure they associate themselves with this policy. And of course, we need a robust plan, the necessary financial, sorry, I need to drink. To have the necessary financial and human resources. Otherwise, you know, it will only remain a set of good intentions. Our action certainly is even more important that we see that women and girls nowadays face declining safety and security globally, from Ukraine to Afghanistan, from the Democratic Republic of Congo to Myanmar. The prevalence of sexual and gender-based violence, including conflict-related sexual violence, demands our full attention. And to illustrate maybe the commitment of Belgium, I would like to share with you some examples. We are, for instance, currently tabling a resolution at the Human Rights Council on technology-facilitated gender-based violence, and we trust we can rely on your support in this endeavor. In the framework of our presidency of the EU, which we have just concluded 3 days ago, we co-organized a European Union task force dedicated to WPS with a special focus on the Sahel region. In Ukraine, we have allocated a voluntary contribution of €1 million to the UN team of experts on the rule of law and sexual violence in conflict. We have also supported the UN Humanitarian and Peace Trust Fund, supporting women, civil society with a contribution of €600,000 focusing on Ukraine and Moldova. We also contributed for an amount of €6 million for the NATO Ukraine cap for hospitals. And across the African continent, our Egmont Institute has been working on women leaderships program for years in countries such as Niger, Senegal, and DRC. And I had the chance to participate actively myself in one of those programs and to attend a very moving graduation ceremony in Kenya. So through these programs, we contribute to the development of skills and competences of leader women that are working in key sectors, including in the field of peace and security. So these are just a few examples that I wanted to share with you. But before concluding, allow me maybe to briefly tackle the situation in Afghanistan, where women are suffering and disappearing from the public space. Despite its limited results, the recent meeting in Doha should be seen as an opportunity to withdraw the attention of the global community on the fate of Afghan women and girls, because we cannot let them down. So since the return of the Taliban, Belgium has resolutely maintained its support to women and girls in the country through multilateral agencies such as UN Women, but also by directly supporting local civil society organizations, among others. We have been funding shelter houses for women's rights defenders in Afghanistan, where women activists and their families can find a refuge if they are under attack, and where they can start a project of relocation. So their situation may sometimes seem hopeless, but it is our collective duty to keep acting for them. So, dear colleagues, I'm really convinced that NATO and its partners should take a leading role in the Women, Peace and Security agenda. We really hope WPS will keep getting a prominent place at the NATO summits with all allies at the table, but you can count on me to keep working in that direction. Thank you very much.
Thank you for those remarks. I now call upon the Foreign Minister of Slovenia, Minister Tanja Fajon, who will talk with us about the best practices of how Slovenia coordinates with other NATO allies and partners on the implementation of their National Action Plan for Women, Peace and Security.
Thank you very much. Good morning or good day to everyone. Thank you, Ambassador Dr. Gupta, also Special Representative Fellin, for organizing this event, and for the wonderful hospitality. I'm truly delighted that we have gathered on the margins of a historic NATO summit to discuss the Women, Peace, Security agenda in the city known for its suffrage movement. As the reality of women and girls around the world turns increasingly hostile, I am proud that our alliance continues to advance WPS agenda, exhibiting our shared values and resolve. Today's event and the new NATO WPS policy attest to the fact that the gender equality and the Women, Peace and Security agenda remain at the heart of our endeavors. Through them we seek increased operational effectiveness and situation awareness, and we safeguard the freedom and security of our population. NATO and its allies have an important role to play in advancing WPS agenda. Our success serves to promote the agenda across the globe. And it is a responsibility of each ally to contribute its part. Slovenia is committed to this as NATO ally and as current UN Security Council member. Our commitment was shown also by dedicating recently a panel discussion to WPS agenda in the NATO at the main event of 20th anniversary of our membership in Alliance in March in Slovenia, and Irene, you were there. It was a wonderful discussion. And before continuing, I wish to recognize the presence also of Yulia Pajovska, a Ukrainian medic, and express my country's full solidarity to Ukraine, with Ukraine and its people. Slovenia's support to Ukraine remains unwavering, and Russia's unjustifiable war of aggression against Ukraine has caused immense suffering of Ukrainian population. And I'm inspired by very bravery and resilience of Ukrainian women, including those in the battlefield. They prove not only willingness, but also ability to serve in combat positions as commanders, overcoming many biases about women in the army. And in this respect, I commend the US for being the driving force in developing MyCap, WPS project for bulletproof vests and uniforms adjusted to the needs of women in the Ukrainian army. And that was Irene, I was telling you, we wish to contribute, so there is willingness to do more in the future. Tomorrow, our leaders will endorse NATO's new WPS policy that offers an ambitious way forward for integrating gender perspectives across everything that NATO does, defending our nations, to deterring our adversaries, preventing and managing crises, and working with many partners around the world. And I wish to focus my remaining thoughts especially on the latter: political dialogue. NATO's partnership frameworks and tools, capacity building, initiatives, trainings, and exercises are important to ensure further advancement and the visibility of WPS agenda. We should seek opportunities to exchange best practices and best lessons learned. And I'm therefore very pleased that WPS has been included in the new strategy for enhancing NATO's engagement with the southern neighborhood. We should also recognize the important work that NATO and allies do through its operations and missions. In particular, I mentioned KFOR and NMI, More work needs to be done by ensuring better gender parity with our contingents. With the Western Balkans, so the region that I am coming from, being of strategic importance to my country, Slovenia, our WPS efforts are focused especially on this region. And in order to ensure women's full, equal, and meaningful participation in peace and security policies, engaging with civil society and coordination with private sector partners will remain very important for us. However, our success and our credibility depends to a notable degree on our own internal NATO and allied progress in implementing the WPS agenda, and we must do our part. NATO has the potential to become the most powerful example of WPS implementation, and we very much look forward to its realization. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister Fellin. I would just request that we all keep our remarks to 3 minutes, please, because I'm nervous that we won't make it in time for the Secretary's reception. Let me now call upon the Minister of Justice of Romania, Alina Gorgheu. Could you share how Romania aligns its efforts in implementing the WPS National Action Plan and how it is linked to the NATO WPS policy to ensure the safety and protection of women?
Thank you very much for hosting us. I will be short. It is an honor, dear friends, to share my thoughts with you. As Minister of Justice, as a mother, I know the hurdles we women face in all fields. Fairness and justice must be guiding principles in the implementation of women, peace and security objectives. I want to start with a simple truth. You cannot do justice for women without women in justice. Without true justice, there can't be real peace. And my country, Romania, knows this well. Russia's war is at our borders. We see firsthand the horrors lived by Ukrainian victims of Putin's war. Women are vital to sustaining communities post-conflict, and we see that what drives peoples to overcome the trauma of war and aggression is the hope that justice will be served. I try to put a new perspective into the discussion. We have the duty to bring justice to the heart of the human women, peace and security agenda. Romania provides a successful recipe for women's involvement in social stability. In our justice system, women account for almost 80% of all judges in the High Court, and over 70% of employees in my ministry are women. The whole system in Romania supports the effort, and we are a NATO member state that spends 2.5% of its GDP on the defense sector. A part of that goes to implementing the WPS agenda, and this is very important for us and for everybody. We will soon adopt our second national strategy for 2028. This document includes lessons learned from the Romanian and US's co-presidency of the national focal points from 2023, and we strive to have a decision-making process through gender lenses. Romania's action plan is built on the 4 pillars of the Resolution 1325, prevention, protection, participation, relief and recovery. And we know as a fact that traditional gender norms dictate that men must be on the front lines and women must stay at home. But we know better in Romania. Women leaders don't go to war. Increasing the number of women in security fields is a choice for a future with less war. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Minister. Thank you for emphasizing the importance of representation. I'd now like to invite Ambassador Eric Nelson, who serves as the Associate Director of the George C. Marshall European Center for Security Studies, and he'll talk to us about how the implementation of a WPS policy can address key disinformation and misinformation operations tactics and narratives that are employed by Russia.
Thank you, Ambassador Gupta. I'd like to reinforce many of the good points made and talk about, I think, principally about how we need to develop a stronger gender-responsive leadership, as you describe it. When you look at disinformation, it reminds us that warfare and conflict today is conducted in multiple domains, in cybersecurity, in lawfare, in economic realm, in disinformation. And that's why we talk more and more about total defense. We talk about resilience, about society's ability to resist these attacks, to stay standing and to recover and rebuild. All of these domains have women fully represented and fully impacted. And responding adequately in all of these domains requires women fully engaged. The full implementation, full participation of women should be intuitive to all of us, to all leaders. But what we see is Russians are directing their disinformation efforts against women. We see these disinformations specifically targeted to marginalizing women, to keeping them from participating and to discouraging them from leading. So we see that the Russians know that this is a vulnerability of ours, that disinformation is intended to sow discord, to undermine cohesion, and to trigger division among us over women's empowerment, sadly, is not difficult to do. So our response needs to be very deliberate. And our response needs to recognize that this targeting is getting at a fundamental requirement, that we respond in a way that demonstrates total defense. So I see that it's very critical that we talk more and more about how leadership needs to be deliberate and needs to be proactive, recognizing that women, peace, and security is intuitive. And women, peace, and security needs to be imperative when you look at this broad array of threats. It needs to become an imperative so that one day it's inherent in our approach to our defense and security. We cannot consider that women, peace, and security is work to be shouldered principally by women. We cannot consider that this is something that's nice to have, that we can achieve during peacetime, or that it's something that we require new resources to achieve. This is about completing our team and filling empty seats or creating seats at the table. And this is not a zero-sum game, which is where the disinformation wants us, how disinformation wants us to think of it. And we see in our recruiting shortfalls that we are failing to incorporate women when so many allies cannot even staff our services. Obviously, we should do a better job, and we could succeed if we thought about how women are a principal part of our response. WPS needs to be central in our thinking of strategic competition, because our strategic competition is also about our values. If we are truly about empowerment of women versus subjugation of women, if we truly want to create deterrence and collective security and defend human rights, then our actions must match our values, and we must walk the talk. We need to turn vision to action, lead with force and fidelity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Nelson. Finally, it's a great honor for me to invite Yulia Paevska to speak. She is our 2023 International Women of Courage awardee and founder of Tyra's Angels, to talk about your organization's support to the Ukrainian army.
Я буду говорити українською, я перепрошую, моя англійська далека від ідеалу, я не хочу вас катувати. Як там з перекладом, я не розумію. Yeah, it works? Great. Excuse me, I'll talk Ukrainian because my English is really not good. I'm not happy about it. So. But Ukrainian, я вважаю, що українська мова мусить звучати в цьому будинку і в цій країні так само, як і всі інші. Звичайно, я дуже горжусь тим, що я знаходжусь разом з вами тут. Я дуже вдячна, і це велика честь для мене. Але я не буду витрачати багато часу на політез. Тому що в моїй країні війна, і ми не маємо часу на речі, які забирають нашу енергію. У нас конференція «Жінки, мир та безпека». І я в першу чергу хотіла би звернути вашу увагу на безпеку. Це те, що примусило мене 10 років тому долучитись до допомоги Збройним силам. Це те, що свого часу примусило мене підписати контракт зі Збройними силами і як військова брати участь в бойових діях. Це те, що трошки більше, ніж 2 роки примусило мене поїхати в Маріуполь на зустріч війні, на зустріч загрозі, на зустріч безжальному ворогу. Ми, жінки, такі. Ви знаєте, як ми дбаємо про свої домівки. Особливо українки. Ми дуже такі. Ми дуже любимо, щоб все вдома було класно. І безпека для дітей, для нашого майбутнього – це найвищий пріоритет для нас. Тому дуже багато жінок ідуть саме вперед, на фронт, на зустріч загрозі. І я думаю, що саме тому я тут зараз, тому що я можу бути тут ефективна. Загроза в іншому місці, але ефективність досягається в різних місцях. Зараз це є моя зброя проти ворога. Вчора я спізнилась на літак через те, що у мене був конект на перельот до Вашингтону. І я спізнилась на літак, тому що коли ми приземлились, я з'ясувала, що Київ піддався бомбардуванню. Мене взяло більше години часу з'ясувати, що всі мої близькі, рідні і мої друзі в безпеці і цілі. Але, на жаль, не всі. Один лікар, якого я знала особисто, загинув в Маріуполі, в Києві, в Охмадиті. Він якраз проводив операцію хворій дитині. Це абсолютно цивільні люди. Я хочу говорити про безпеку. Це не наші діти, це наші діти. Твої, ваші діти. Це наші спільні діти. Я говорю про майбутнє, про безпеку майбутнього. Якщо не зупинити це зараз, воно прийде до вас. Я вас не лякаю. Я бачила Маріуполь. У мене на очах руйнували 500 000 міста. Ви знаєте мою історію. Але ви не знаєте історії мільйонів українок, які страждають зараз. Форма. Дякую за цю ініціативу і за те, що ви робите. Це надзвичайно важливо. У мене нема проблем з формою, моя фігура дозволяє мені користатися чоловічою формою. Але для ефективності жінок на фронті це надзвичайно важливо. Так що я дуже вдячна. Це є складова нашої спільної майбутньої безпеки. Для цього ще треба багато зробити насправді. Наприклад, я хотіла би попросити вас сприяти розвитку, написанню, можливо, програми психологічної підтримки для військовослужбовців і для цивільних, і особливо для тих жінок, що пройшли полон. Я була в полоні росіян 3 місяці. Це поза межами добра і зла. Я зараз пишу книгу, де буде трошки описаний цей досвід, але я не можу про все писати досі, знов-таки з міркувань безпеки. Тому що багато моїх посестер ще й досі у полоні. Світ змінюється. Росіяни, я присутність їх відчуваю буквально будь-де. Ця надзвичайно ядовита, як сказати, пропаганда проникає навіть сюди. І якщо ви згадаєте цей наратив «Втома від війни», який пішов саме з Росії і використовується навіть тут і зараз, я психолог. Я хотіла би звернути вашу увагу на захист психологічного середовища, в першу чергу. Бо зброя, головна зброя росіян – це брехня. І жінки дуже тонко відчувають, коли їм брешуть. Нас не обманеш, правда? Будь ласка, зверніть увагу на це. Перемога досягається в голові і в серці. А зброя тільки підтримує цю перемогу. Ми мусимо це зупинити. Я безмежно вдячна за цю можливість. Дякую.
Thank you, Yulia. Thank you so much for your service, your bravery, and your commitment during this war. That attack yesterday was truly horrific. We stand with you and with all of the people of Ukraine. Thank you. Let's move to the second round of our discussion and focus this time on technology-facilitated gender-based violence and its impact on women's leadership as sort of an important component of advocating for women, peace and security policies, laws, and accountability to support survivors of technology-facilitated gender-based violence. So with that, let me call Permanent Representative Wernhardt of Sweden, who has made some impressive advances in countering TFGBV, the acronym that we've developed for this horrible scourge. If you could please speak to your country's work on this area.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ambassador Dr. Gupta, and thank you so much, Special Representative Fellin, for organizing this very important event. I'm indeed honored to speak here today, and I'm more so honored to speak since I also speak on behalf of all the Nordic countries, actually, and Germany, and Lithuania, and Estonia, and the Czech Republic. We share the same concerns, and we have the same priorities when it comes to this very important work. I'll just make a few remarks, but I think the basis, the starting point is the war in Ukraine and the Russian full-scale invasion. It has particularly affected women and girls, and we also know for sure that a great number of Ukrainian women are fighting to defend their country, and they want to fight to defend their country. And this definitely highlights the need to adopt and develop suitable equipment for all military personnel, not only men. Without the right equipment, women will be exposed to greater risks and will not have the same opportunities to fulfill their tasks. And we think also that we need to ensure that the NATO Women, Peace and Security policy here has to be fully implemented also in the context of Ukraine. In support of Ukraine and in the reconstruction of Ukraine, and that the needs of Ukrainian women in that work also will be heard. We talked about the importance of appropriate body armor, and I'd just like to mention here a novelty which is quite interesting, and that's the use of a 3D scan of a person in order to capture the shape of the body from all angles, in order to personalize the body armor. And this is in fact a gender-neutral approach, but it is of great importance, of course, of crucial importance. But this is not enough. A gender perspective needs to be mainstream into the development of all new military technologies and hardware in order to facilitate full participation by both men and women. But technology should not be seen as something isolated, as an island by itself. A gender perspective needs to cut through all domains, and it needs to be integrated also in doctrine, in training, and in exercises. And also in this latter context, I'd just like to mention that we have the Nordic Center for Gender in military operations, which trains staff at all levels and which is an important tool in this work. We also believe that this will enhance decision-making and operational efficiency. And as a member of NATO, of course, we will unrelentlessly work to strengthen this agenda. We all do. And the strengthening of this agenda is also actually to strengthen the whole defense and deterrence work of the alliance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd now like to turn to Ambassador O'Neill. Jackie O'Neill is Canada's first Ambassador for Women, Peace and Security, and she will talk to us about the lessons learned in Canada in implementing WPS, particularly in support of NATO missions in Ukraine and at home.
Thank you, and
I request you to stay within 1 minute.
Good morning and good afternoon for everyone with jet lag in the room. We are delighted as Canada. I'll make a few very brief points. We've just appointed our first woman commander, our first chief of the defense staff and head of the armed forces in Canada, making her currently the only woman in that role among the alliance. We know Slovenia was there first, but currently the only woman. She's very experienced commanding a NATO mission, comes from the combat arms, and is, of course, as a highly capable, qualified, professional person and woman, she is already a target of disinformation campaigns, highly coordinated efforts to undermine her and, as a result, undermine the institution and Canadians' trust in her work. So we will have to apply many of our lessons at home as well. I'll make 3 very brief points about lessons that we've learned in Canada, one for each of NATO's 3 core tasks. On defense and deterrence, we recognize that women-led civil society organizations are core to total defense, to resilience, and to deterrence. And we have to work with them, fund them, and meaningfully include them in all processes and forums. We know this, and we see this in Ukraine every day. We see women serving in uniform. We see the government stretched beyond its limits to focus on defense. And we see women-led civil society organizations that are playing essential roles that enable the government to do that work. So they've delivering basic services, fundraising for equipment, supporting families, providing psychosocial support that Tyra mentioned, leading healthy reintegration of veterans, countering disinformation, and very importantly, rallying international support, including in the Global South. When it comes to crisis prevention and management, when Canadian Armed Forces were providing a humanitarian mission to support Ukrainians fleeing to Poland, we weren't prepared for the majority of the people we were working with being women and children, to provide health services for pregnant women. We weren't ready to provide care for survivors of conflict-related sexual violence or to watch for signs of human trafficking. So we've updated and tried to integrate better preparation, training, and reflexes in crisis response in our National Action Plan. And lastly, on the core task of security cooperation, we found that women, peace, and security is not only an element of interoperability, essentially, among allies. We have common languages and objectives, but it's also a real door opener for collaboration, real dialogue, and real exchange with militaries around the world, including in the Global South. We found it's important to be deliberate in this. Women, peace, and security is a specific element of the Canada-Ukraine Security Cooperation Agreement, and it could be of others. And I think we all have the opportunity to improve our integration of women, peace, and security in the training that we do with one simple step, which is to set aside or dedicate a specific proportion of spots of the trainings that we offer for women from various militaries and set essentially a minimum standard or quota. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Ambassador O'Neill. We'd now like to move to Foreign Minister of Croatia. Minister Rodman, could you highlight the work that Croatia has done to mitigate cyber and hybrid threats that have a disproportionate impact on women?
Thank you so much, and Madam Chair. And the summit is about the security investment, of course, and a strong support for Ukraine and value sharing with our partners. But however, this women, peace, security agenda became an integral part of NATO's policies at all levels of the alliance. Croatia has implemented 2 national action plans regarding the WPS, while third is currently being developed. The second plan addressed precisely the impact of hybrid threats, cybersecurity, climate change, and terrorism, all in the context of the women, peace, and security policy. We are constantly investing in initiatives to empower women and girls in the field of cybersecurity, primarily through education and training. The panel on women and security and defense will be held during Zagreb, our capital city, Zagreb Security Forum in October this year. This globally known diplomatic event will be organized by Croatian Hybrid Warfare Research Institute, as well as Defense and Security University in Zagreb. In recent years, non-governmental organizations such as Women in Tech Croatia held webinars on cybersecurity as well. The regional conference on cyber violence and cybersecurity, with a special focus on youth and women, was held in Zagreb 2 years ago via NATO campaign. The upcoming national plan on women, peace, and security will devote attention to these topics, as well thereby fully aligning with our new NATO policies. Recently, Croatia has been under heavy attacks from hacker groups, Croatian, the most important hospital in Zagreb, Rebro, aiming to undermine the resilience of Croatian society. Since the beginning of the war in Ukraine, Russian invasion of Ukraine, we have been continuously exposed to hybrid threats of various forms due to our close vicinity to our Western Balkans. As Tanya also mentioned, it's our immediate neighborhood. We know the region, our region that is actually of strategic interest and importance to NATO. Therefore, Croatian institutions and society recognize the patterns of actions our adversaries undertake to destabilize our societies, typically exploiting their most vulnerable members. With its experience from the homeland war, Croatia was also the victim of aggression, and we were a victim, and we know who was culprit. Croatia deeply understands the significance of the problem of women and girls suffering, as well as the importance of their role in conflict prevention, management, and post-conflict activities. Unfortunately, we all witnessed the horrific consequences of Russia's brutal aggression on Ukrainian society, including the most vulnerable, namely the women and girls, particularly concerning conflict-related sexual violence. Dreadful treatment of women and girls continues in Iran, within the Taliban regime in Afghanistan and other autocratic states, and Hadia also mentioned the situation in Afghanistan. Adversaries of the alliance have brought access to modern technologies, which they increasingly use to promote the hate speech and discrimination, often targeting women and girls. Consistency and unwavering dedication to protect the rights of women and girls and promote gender equality are fundamental to NATO's and allies' credibility, integrity. Finally, I'm very, very pleased to inform you that Croatian diplomat and a lady, my colleague, Mrs. Vlasta Brklačić, began to serve in European Union Assistance Mission for Ukraine. She's now there. And so Croatia is looking forward to organizing a special discussion panel on women, peace, and security during our flagship diplomatic event that is taking place each summer in the town of Dubrovnik in Croatia in July. We stand ready to assist with our experience and expertise. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We look forward to visiting beautiful Croatia in July. Thank you so much for your remarks. I would now like to close out our discussion by inviting Senator Jean Shaheen of New Hampshire to discuss the comprehensive legislation that was adopted, thanks to your leadership, by the US and the importance of bipartisan support for women, peace, and security on the Hill.
Well, thank you, Ambassador Gupta. For all of you who wondered why I'm here, it's because I sponsored the legislation that gave the U.S., and I'm very proud to say we were the first country to pass women, peace, and security, the only country to have done it legislatively so far. And I think that was really important because it was a learning opportunity, and it remains to be an opportunity for us to build support for the agenda, to encourage bipartisan support. I had Senator Capito from West Virginia, who was a Republican, was my co-sponsor on the legislation. Unfortunately, she couldn't be here today, but she continues to support this effort. And there have been a lot of really impressive comments made by everyone this morning, but one of the things that I haven't heard is the importance of continuing to educate people about why this is important. You know, it's kind of like the medical trials that we did in the U.S. for such a long time, and we only used men in our medical trials because we didn't realize that women were actually different. Well, it's the same challenge, I think, that we've got a job to educate people about the difference that it makes to have women at the table. And everybody in this room understands that. But as I talk to some of my colleagues in the Senate and Congress, they don't get why it matters. And so when you say to them, you know, if women are at the table, the negotiating table, when a peace deal is signed, there's a 35% better chance that it will last for 15 years or longer than if they're not at the table. When we've got that data to show people what a difference it makes to have women integrated throughout, it's really critical. And I think we get there by doing the things that all of you have talked about. And I liked Ms. O'Neill's point that as we're thinking about training exercises in NATO, I know we don't want to do quotas, but goals would be good. No? Having goals for a number of women in NATO leadership would be good. You know, just as we've got 2% of GDP for spending on defense, we ought to have a goal for women's participation. So I think a lot of exciting work is being done now, and thank you to Ukraine for the lessons that you are giving us as we think about the role of women. I had the opportunity to meet with several women in the Ukrainian military a year or so ago, and one of the things they said to me that I have talked about frequently at home is they said, give us the weapons so that we can fight so you don't have to. So we so appreciate what you are doing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator Shaheen. Thank you for your leadership. We couldn't function without it, so thank you so very much. I'd now like to turn back to my colleague Irene to summarize the discussion today before we close the session.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all of you for your contribution. It's clear that we would have needed more time to listen to you, but we don't want to make Secretary Blinken waiting too long. And so I will wrap up with some reflection, because I think that the conversation we had today is particularly relevant and valuable as we look into two significant milestones, the NATO 75th anniversary and the nearly 25 years of the United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325. These milestones serve as stark reminders of our collective commitment to defending democracy, individual liberty, and the rule of law, while advancing gender equality, promoting peace, and ensuring the security of all individuals. Celebrating anniversaries also prompt us to reflect on the future, and when it comes to the future of the Alliance, the Women, Peace and Security agenda is as relevant as it has ever been. But as we all know, our fight for gender equality is never ending. With this new policy in place, I now look to translate this framework into actionable steps. And as it was mentioned, as part of these efforts, I will focus on working closely with civilian and military leadership across NATO to advance women, peace and security and gender equality in the years ahead. I'm looking forward to supporting the next Secretary General Mark Rutte, as I was pleased and honored to do for the last 2 years with Secretary Jens Stoltenberg. I will do it throughout the Women, Peace and Security Leadership Task Force in place at NATO, and I call on all of you to do the same with your respective professional context and on a global stage. I ask you to lead by example and be an inspiration for the new generation. And this is exactly to respond to what Senator Shaheen said, is to educate, not give for granted that the others understand. And the example of the uniform I made before, it's clearly like this. I had the majority of colleagues at NATO asking why we were, setting this exhibition there. And they said, why do we need to talk about this? It's clear that we are different. And I said, yes, now it seems clear. But then concretely, nobody did this. And it's exactly about the trial and the medicine. So nothing is granted yet when we talk about gender differences and then translate into women, peace and security. So we have come a long way, but we still have a long way to go to achieve gender equality in the peace and security sector and beyond it. But the fact that we are all here working together, renewing to our promise to a full implementation of the principle embedded in Women, Peace and Security agenda assures me that we are moving full steam ahead in the right direction. Working together, we can shape the future we want, the future we need. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Irene, and thank you very much to all of you for your comments and remarks. There's not much left to say other than to really commit together to renew our promise to create a more inclusive, secure, and peaceful world. And the only way to do that is to make sure that women can meaningfully participate in all levels of the security sector. So thank you very much. We're now going to gather in the Ben Franklin room on the 8th floor for the reception hosted by Secretary Blinken, which is to begin at 11 a.m. sharp. So you're going to have to make your way quickly to the elevators. There'll be volunteers guiding you to take you upstairs. Thank you so very much. One round of applause for everyone.
I'm looking forward to supporting the next Secretary General Mark Rutte, as I was pleased and honored to do for the last 2 years with Secretary Jens Stoltenberg. I will do it throughout the Women, Peace and Security Leadership Task Force in place at NATO, and I call on all of you to do the same with your respective professional contexts and on a global stage. I ask you to lead by example and be an inspiration for the new generation. And this is exactly to respond to what Senator Shaheen said, is to educate, not give for granted that the others understand. And the example of the uniform I made before, it's clearly like this. I had the majority of colleagues at NATO asking why we were, setting this exhibition there. And they said, why do we need to talk about this? It's clear that we are different. And I said, yes, now it seems clear. But then concretely, nobody did this. And it's exactly about the try and the medicine. So nothing is granted yet when we talk about gender differences and then translate into women, peace and security. So we have come a long way, but we still have a long way to go to achieve gender equality in the peace and security sector and beyond it. But the fact that we are all here working together, renewing today our promise to a full implementation of the principle embedded in Women, Peace and Security agenda assures me that we are moving full steam ahead in the right direction. Working together, we can shape the future we want, the future we need. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Irene, and thank you very much to all of you for your comments and remarks. There's not much left to say other than to really commit together to renew our promise to create a more inclusive, secure, and peaceful world. And the only way to do that is to make sure that women can meaningfully participate in all levels of the security sector. So thank you very much. We're now going to gather in the Ben Franklin room on the 8th floor for the reception hosted by Secretary Blinken, which is to begin at 11 a.m. sharp. So you're going to have to make your way quickly to the elevators. There'll be volunteers guiding you to take you upstairs. Thank you so very much. One round of applause for everyone.
distinguished guests, the Secretary of State, accompanied by NATO Secretary General Special Representative for Women, Peace and Security, the Minister of Foreign Affairs for the Republic of Iceland, and U.S. Senator from New Hampshire.
Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the State Department. It is wonderful to have everyone in this room on this day for this occasion. 76 years ago, a year before the treaty that created NATO was signed, President Truman signed into law two other documents that proved foundational for America's lasting security. The first, on June the 12th, 1948, allowed women to serve as regular members of the United States military. The second, just 6 weeks later, banned segregation in our armed forces. Both reforms faced resistance and skepticism in the United States. Congress held hearings to debate the merits of permitting women to serve in the same capacity as men. The very first witness called was General Dwight E. Eisenhower. Asked why he supported the reform, his answer was simple: we need them. The same is true today for virtually every one of NATO's strategic objectives. To achieve them, we have to meaningfully include women at every level. As we know, the evidence shows that when women enjoy greater physical security, when their rights are respected, when societies have higher levels of gender equality, entire countries are more stable, they're more prosperous, they're more peaceful. And when women are meaningfully involved in making and keeping the peace, it is more likely to endure. This is not just a women's issue. It's a national security issue, an economic issue, and yes, a moral issue as well, including for NATO, which was built on a shared commitment to defend liberty, to defend democracy, to defend the rule of law. Living up to that commitment is also vital to the strength and well-being of our nations and our citizens. That's why one of the very first actions that President Biden took was to form a commission to develop America's first ever national strategy on gender equity and equality, a strategy that we put out in 2021 and that we've been working to implement every day since. That's why we released an updated strategy and a national action plan on women, peace, and security just last year. And it's why advancing women, peace, and security has enjoyed long-standing support in our Congress. We're so grateful to have a true champion of that issue here today, Senator Jeanne Shaheen. Thank you, Jeanne, for your remarkable leadership. And yet, despite the overwhelming evidence of the benefits of ensuring that women have a leading role in making and keeping peace, despite the real progress that we've made on this issue over the last few years, we've still got our work cut out for us. So today, I'd like to briefly focus on three areas where NATO's enduring effectiveness demands that we do more. First, we have to continue to improve the meaningful participation of women and girls in all of their diversity. If we let obstacles and biases stand in the way of their full participation, we're simply not building the strongest alliance that we can. Consider that of the 32 allies, 6 have women who are permanent representatives. One of the 6 happens to be our ambassador to NATO, Julie Smith. As some of you might have taken note of yesterday, Julie's also the new announcer for the Washington Nationals, as she opened the game and Secretary General Stoltenberg threw out the first pitch. But Ambassador Smith represents the United States at NATO not because she's the best woman for the job, but because she's the best person for the job. Just as was true of her 2 predecessors, Toria Nuland and Kay Bailey Hutchison. But how many women like Julie are out there in every NATO country who have been held back from reaching their full potential? And how much of our nations, how much is our alliance lost as a result? Second, we need to fully integrate strategic thinking about women, peace, and security across all of our efforts, particularly in addressing some of the 21st century challenges like those posed by digital technology. This technology has, of course, immense potential to amplify the voices of women and girls, but it's also increasingly being exploited to enable online harassment, to enable online abuse. Women, girls, LGBTQI+ people, particularly those in public life, civil society leaders, are especially vulnerable to this violence. Such attacks not only harm their victims, they have a chilling effect on the participation of women and girls and other underrepresented groups. This is a threat to the health of our democracies, and we're taking steps to push back. In 2022, we launched the Global Partnership for Action on Gender-Based Online Harassment and Abuse to help us better understand, better prevent, better counter these attacks. 15 nations have partnered with the United States in this effort, including 5 of our NATO allies, and I strongly encourage others to join in this effort. Third, we need to share best practices in women, peace, and security beyond our alliance. That will make our partners stronger. It will make them more stable. It will help prevent and diminish drivers of instability in other parts of the world, which increasingly affect our own security. And just to give you a couple of quick examples. This year, the U.S. launched Women, Peace, and Security regional centers in Colombia and Kosovo. We're grateful to have President Osmani here with us today. President Osmani was instrumental in the launch of this initiative. It's already demonstrating the way these centers can serve as hubs for ideas and for innovation. In the months ahead, we'll launch a 3rd center in the Philippines. And these hubs bring together government, civil society, academia, the private sector, to collaborate on tackling the challenges that we're talking about here today. Last year, the U.S. military launched its first ever Women, Peace, and Security Cooperation Initiative in the Indo-Pacific. Together with Australia and New Zealand, we've held trainings to help the militaries in 11 partner nations integrate the gender dimension of threats into their own planning, into their own operations, such as how to draw on the leadership of women and girls in responding to natural disasters, including their knowledge of the most vulnerable populations and how most effectively to reach them and support them. We're training and empowering women's civil society groups and peace builders so that they can play a leading role in building peace and building free and open societies and negotiating the end to conflicts. Even, and maybe even especially, in places where those in power ruthlessly repress the rights of women and girls, like Afghanistan. For even as the Taliban denies them the right to go to school, to go to work, to move freely and participate in public life, women and girls continue to fight for their right to build a brighter future for themselves and for their country. As they do, we're working every day to support their efforts, working with governments, with NGOs, with private sector, with academia, to help Afghan women and girls keep studying, to build their skills, to build their connections, to work remotely. We also continue to rally global pressure on the Taliban to reverse these repressive policies, which are hurting all Afghans. And we continue to partner with women in places where we see ongoing fighting, like Sudan and like Ukraine. From the moment that Putin launched his full-scale invasion, Ukrainian women have stepped up in every conceivable way to defend their country, to defend their communities, to defend their families, including in combat. Right now, there are thousands of Ukrainian women who are serving on the front lines, literally as snipers, as machine gunners, as medevac pilots, commanding tank units and artillery batteries. Every day, they prove that valor has no gender. But too often, Ukrainian women fighters don't have the equipment that they need to meet their unique needs, forcing many to buy and even design their own kits. Today, we're taking a step to fix that by announcing that NATO allies will provide more than $7 million to purchase equipment for women in Ukraine's armed forces, including more than 10,000 bulletproof vests, uniforms, boots. We applaud every ally that's come forward to help in this initiative. It's just one small part of our effort can not only defend itself today, but also get to the place where it can stand strongly on its own feet, militarily, economically, democratically. That is the mark of success for Ukraine. That will be the strongest possible rebuke to Vladimir Putin. Here's the reality. Ukraine cannot do that. It can't succeed in achieving that ultimate success without the full and equal participation of all of its people. For Ukraine's economy to not only survive but thrive, Ukraine needs women. Last year, 37,000 new businesses registered in Ukraine, more than in the year leading up to the war. The majority were founded by women. For Ukraine to realize its democratic aspirations and build and strengthen its independent institutions, Ukraine needs women. We see that in the Ukrainian women working as anti-corruption and human rights activists, independent judges and prosecutors, reporters in the country's free press. Ukraine's resilience, the path to success, is built in large part on the shoulders and in the hearts of the women of Ukraine. What's true for Ukraine is true for so much of what we have to achieve in our alliance. And so, we thought it was fitting as we kick off this summit, this 75th anniversary summit, a summit that looks not only to the achievements of the past, but looks especially to what the alliance has to do and has to do together to ensure our security, to defend our democracies going forward. We thought it was very appropriate to kick things off with this event, with this focus on women, peace, and security, and a commitment to bring our focus to empowering women's full, meaningful, and equal participation, not just to this forum, but to each and every issue that we have to tackle together. Our success, and yes, our security, depends on it. I thank you very, very much for joining us today, but not just today, for the work that pretty much everyone in this room is doing every day to advance this agenda. We know that when we come together for a summit, for one day of meetings and discussion, it's important. It puts a spotlight on issues, but what really matters is the next 364 days and the work that you are going to be doing, we're going to be doing every day. With that, and with that in mind, it's my honor to introduce someone who has dedicated much of her career to empowering women peace building, the NATO Secretary General's Special Representative for Women, Peace and Security, Irene Fellin. Irene, the floor is yours.
Distinguished ministers, excellencies, dear friends, it is a true honor and an utmost pleasure for me to have the opportunity to address you today on the occasion of the Women, Peace and Security reception. My special thank you go to you, Secretary Blinken, for hosting us here at the State Department and for being on the front line for the implementation of this important agenda. I'm truly impressed by the remarkable initiatives that you just described as part of the US WPS strategy. You are leading by example. In its 75 years of history, NATO has demonstrated to be an incredible adaptive alliance, capable of transforming itself whenever needed, while sticking to its core values. Our attachment to the Women, Peace and Security agenda is a distinctive feature of the transatlantic alliance. Standing up for and helping advance the rights and participation of women in defense and security is very much at the heart of who we are and what we do, as individuals, nations, and collectively as an alliance. We know that setbacks in global peace and security go hand in hand with setbacks in gender equality. Globally, women increasingly face threats to their political and social rights and their personal security, as well as barriers to their full participation in peace and security processes. As an alliance based on democratic values, this matters for NATO. As Russia's war of aggression in Ukraine continues, with devastating impact on civilians, as we just saw yesterday, our work to understand the gender dimension of this conflict is of vital importance to inform us how we can better support Ukraine. It is clear that the principles for UNSCR 1325, adopted almost 25 years ago, are not only yet to be fully implemented, but are indeed increasingly challenged. In line with this recognition, at the 2023 Vilnius Summit, NATO allied resolved to update the NATO WPS policy. And after a year of work, this new policy is now ready to be endorsed tomorrow by heads of state and government at this Washington summit. Let me now share with you some reflection on this new policy. It is an important part of the implementation of NATO's 2022 strategic concept. Within the context of deterrence and defense, for example, NATO commits for the first time to advance work on challenges and threats like gender disinformation and technology-facilitated gender-based violence. This can include cyber harassment, hate speech, or video and image-based abuse. They carry not only health and safety consequences, but also political consequences, as they silence women in online spaces, ultimately diminishing their engagement in public life and democratic processes. When we look at the opportunities and challenges of technologies, from drone-related warfare, cyber attacks, and generative AI, we will ensure that we are looking at how this impacts diverse segments of the population, and will focus on our efforts on mitigating any exacerbation of gender inequality in the work we do. While the Women, Peace and Security agenda is relevant to deterrence and defense, it is also an essential partnership tool. In fact, to be successful in integrating WPS in all that we do, collaboration and engagement with diverse actors as part of NATO's cooperative security efforts is key. We will continue to work closely with our partners, some of whom are with us here today. NATO partnership represents a privileged mechanism throughout which we can learn from one another, and this is particularly relevant when it comes to Ukraine defending itself against Russia's war of aggression. In this context, as Secretary Blinken just mentioned, an unprecedented number of women joined the armed forces of Ukraine in order to defend their own country, challenging societal norms and stereotypes. And in fact, the service women found themselves fighting on different fronts, some more obvious than others. And one of them is the lack of appropriate equipment, namely body armor and uniform fits for them. So I would like to join the announcement just made by Secretary Blinken that throughout NATO's comprehensive assistance package for Ukraine, we will fund this initial production of body armor, winter uniform and combat boots for service women of the armed forces of Ukraine. And allow me to personally thank you, Mr. Secretary, for strongly supporting our project, as well as our allies Canada, Denmark, Finland, Iceland, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, North Macedonia and Norway for their important financial contribution. Just before we joined the reception, other allies came to me to say they want to join this initiative and fund more support for Ukraine, so I'm sure that we will have other projects and continued support to the service women of Ukraine. And I'm looking at Deputy Prime Minister Olga Stefanishyna, who is leading the work with a comprehensive assistance package, and we will continue our joint efforts in the coming months. Partnership is not only among nations, it is with civil society organizations as well. And I recognize many CEOs representatives present in this room today. I want to reassure you that strengthened engagement with women civil society actors, including throughout the NATO Civil Society Advisory Panel, is and will remain a priority, as it helps us stay connected to the foundations of the WPS agenda. Distinguished guests, the road ahead requires unwavering commitment and collective efforts at all levels. It demands that we, from the political and military leaders to the civilian and military staff, continue to champion gender equality. As part of this new policy, I strongly advocate for a more gender-responsive and accountable leadership. This means that leaders, men and women alike, are called to lead by example and commit to fully advance the Women, Peace and Security agenda at NATO and beyond. I therefore call on you today to be part of the cultural change that is still needed. Together, we can create a future where every individual, regardless of their gender, can contribute to and benefit from peace and security. Thank you. I would like now to pass the floor to Ms. Þórdís Gylfadóttir, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Iceland.
Thank you, Secretary of State Blinken, Special Representative Fellin, and other distinguished guests for providing an important opportunity for us, allies and partners, right at the start of the summit to reaffirm our commitment to advancing the women, peace and security agenda. Gathering in the wake of Russia's brutal attacks on civilian targets in Ukraine, our support and solidarity is unwavering. Tomorrow we will endorse NATO's very impressive and I would say progressive WPS policy. Thanks to everyone involved at the headquarters in Brussels, in the respective capitals and from civil society for your solid work. Iceland has for years been a strong proponent for the women, peace and security agenda at NATO, globally and at home. Even as we face mounting challenges on the global stage, or perhaps particularly because of that, we cannot lose sight of this important agenda. At critical times when so much is at stake, it is vital to mobilize all available human capital, both men and women. This is equally important for economic growth, as well as deterrence and defense. And here we have a lot to learn from our Ukrainian friends. Ukrainian women are at the front lines of the war, assuming increasingly crucial roles. They are making a significant contribution to the defense of Ukraine today and tomorrow, and building the resilience for Ukraine to prevail. They are leading humanitarian relief efforts, taking up key positions in the administration, and playing a vocal role in Ukraine's civil society. We need to listen attentively to the voices of Ukrainian women and support them on their terms. I am therefore pleased to announce Iceland's contribution of €500,000 to the CAP Trust Fund to provide Ukrainian women with critical body armors, uniforms and boots. Providing them with the appropriate equipment is both essential for their protection on the battlefield, as well as an important step in modernizing Ukraine's future force. And this last point is key. Bringing women on board is not only a women's rights issue. It brings benefits to the whole of society and to our collective security. This we in Iceland know, this the Ukrainian society also knows. It's not about waiting for the time when you can afford on focusing on women, peace and security, or gender equality for that matter, or empowering women. You become stronger because you focus on those points, not when you afford them. Cheers to that. Distinguished guests, the WPS agenda is a reflection of our values. When women's rights are faced with a backlash around the world, it is especially important to continue promoting gender equality and inclusivity. The endorsement of NATO's new WPS policy tomorrow comes timely and is essential in the context of the current security environment we are facing at NATO. NATO, as our leading security organization, has a unique role to play in advancing the WPS agenda across all three core tasks integrated in our strategic concept. We have taken important steps at NATO in recent years, recognizing that gender perspectives should be at the center of a secondary importance. The new WPS policy provides a strong foundation. However, it is implementation of the policy and the upcoming action plan that will matter the most. We need to put the issue at the top of our agenda as a leadership issue, both at NATO and back home, with focus on sustainable resources, meaningful representation, gender mainstreaming and strong accountability. So let's move forward with ambition on women, peace and security, both for us as an alliance and for Ukraine and for the whole world. Now is the opportunity to demonstrate that NATO can be a real champion of women, peace and security. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to all of you who are here from outside of the United States to the 75th NATO Summit. We're delighted to have you here. We wish it were a little cooler in Washington, but now, I know all of you are saying, I understand why Secretary Blinken's here. We understand why the NATO representative for WPS is here. We understand why the foreign minister from Iceland is here. But why is that senator from New Hampshire here? For those of you who don't know where New Hampshire is, it's up north, where it's cooler. But I'm here because I had the good fortune to pick up the legislation when Barbara Boxer left the Senate to sponsor the Women, Peace and Security legislation for the United States. We were the first and remain the only country to have legislatively passed the WPS agenda, and I'm very proud of that and very proud to be with all of you participating in the summit and talking about why it matters to have women part of the agenda for NATO and in all other aspects of our governments. It's been 24 years since the United Nations Security Council formally acknowledged the role that women must play in preventing and resolving conflict and preserving peace with the passage of Resolution 1325. And for the last 2.5 decades, the United States, NATO, and our allies have stepped up to put into action the core values that underline WPS. The gathering here demonstrates today this partnership's enduring commitment to advancing the WPS agenda within our own countries and as an alliance that is committed to democracy and freedom. So fundamentally, WPS acknowledges the disproportionate impact that conflict has on women, but also the essential role that women play in preventing violence, resolving conflict, and ensuring peace. And I'm sure that most of you here are familiar with the often cited statistic, but I think it's worth repeating, that women's involvement in peace negotiations increases the probability of a peace agreement lasting 15 years by 35%. It makes a difference. This is a measurable impact that we can't afford to ignore. NATO is a military alliance, but it's also a values-based alliance. It's joined together by our common commitment that to advance our collective security, everyone needs a seat at the table. It's a privilege to have sponsored that legislation, and bipartisan, bicameral support has never been more important than it is today. At a time when it feels like national security has never been more subject to the change of administrations, Congress has reaffirmed its steadfast commitment to our NATO alliance and our WPS agenda. I've been honored to work with many of you here today to advance that agenda within the United States and abroad. This summit is an important opportunity to reaffirm our commitment to Ukraine also, as they defend their country against an unprovoked Russian invasion. Ukrainian women, as everyone here has said, have been central to the war effort since day one. They've served on the front lines, they've represented their country abroad, they've led efforts to preserve democracy at home and ensure the safety of the Ukrainian people. It is necessary that this summit send the powerful message that we stand with Ukrainian women who are leading the on-the-ground response. You can clap for that, folks. Wake up. Come on. Ukraine's fight is a fight, and WPS is central to the better future all Ukrainians are fighting for themselves at home, but for democracies around the world. This summit is an opportunity to reaffirm our commitment to advancing that agenda. And thank you to everyone here today for your commitment to WPS, for your commitment to NATO, Secretary Blinken. Thank you for prioritizing WPS within the Department of State and ensuring that our diplomatic corps reflects our diverse nation and pursues policies that prioritize women's equality and equity. And to Ambassador Gupta, thank you for your leadership within the State Department to advance the WPS agenda. Thank you all very much.
Well, thank you again, everyone. So great to have you here today. Great to have you at the summit, and great to have you in this effort together. Enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you.